The AWB overwhelmed the police, who retreated before them.
Signs of glass and everything shattering and everything, and reports coming through that they are looking for us, particularly Rolf and Cyril.
Terrified delegates barricaded themselves in their offices. In the conference chamber, the AWB chanted and daubed slogans demanding a separate white state.
An important turning point in this process was when my security guards kneeled down with their automatic weapons pointed at the corridor, and as the AWB people came around the corridor, shouted to them, "Stop!"
Ministers were compelled to promise Terre Blanche there would be no arrests. He agreed to take his men out.
Now, this had caused not only a collapse of what we had intended, but what was intended to be something for the attention of the world, then was turned against us.
I was able to discuss the events with some of the National Party ministers, and they, in the end, I think, drove them more and more away from having any form of understanding or even sympathy with the right-wingers.
Soon after the invasion, the negotiators agreed that an election should be held the following April. With the ANC growing in confidence and looking certain to win the election, the National Party had retreated bit by bit on nearly all its power-sharing demands. One remained. The National Party insisted that its white minority ministers must have the power to block ANC decisions in cabinet. They called this governing by consensus.
So the key question now was, now what will they do in cabinet? To what extent will they be in a position to influence or even to veto particular decisions?
It was the one issue on which the ANC was not prepared to make a concession on. That is, the cabinet should be able to take decisions by majority rather than by consensus as they had originally wanted it.
When the last day of the conference came, Ramaphosa was convinced the government negotiators, headed by Rolf Meyer, couldn't afford to take the blame for a breakdown.
We therefore realized that this was their weak point and pressed on very hard until we finally got them to agree in the very early hours of the morning to that cabinet should be able to take decisions by majority rather than on a consensus basis.
This meant that if the ANC won the election, it would run the government. The proposal was put to the existing cabinet for endorsement. The Volksfront looked for allies. Under apartheid, each of South Africa's black groups was assigned to a tribal state, so that all blacks could be treated as foreigners. These tribal states were to be abolished on election day. Of the 10 tribal states around the country's periphery, the most populous was KwaZulu, in the province of Natal. KwaZulu was a one-party state run by the Inkatha Freedom Party, the IFP, of Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. He was refusing to take part in the election and could pull perhaps 3 million Zulus out with him. The ANC now had members on a transitional council which monitored the cabinet on matters concerning the election. They also had access to the intelligence services that had once spied on them, so they could see what their adversaries were up to.
Chief Buthelezi was a greater threat to the process in Terre Blanche because Chief Buthelezi did have a base. He had an ethnic base, a base which had as its main content political backwardness among some of his constituents, but he did have a base and he was able to do damage.